I'm Jamie O'Kane, CPA, Small Business Advanced Tax Planning and Compliance Extraordinaire, and this is the Abundant Beans Podcast, the podcast that takes my love for learning what makes people tick while digging into the good, bad, and ugly of small business ownership. We strive to give you the insight that only those in the trenches of being and working with entrepreneurs can provide. Today, we'd like to welcome to the podcast Chad Peterson. Chad is an expert business broker and the founder of Peterson Acquisitions, an award-winning M&A firm. Chad's firm handles transactions in $1 million to the $25 million range, with some deals exceeding $25 million. Wow. He works with businesses all over the United States and has completed international deals as well. Peterson Acquisitions was recently named by one publication as the #1 ranked business broker in the United States. That's really awesome. Which publication was that? I don't know if that's
a couple of them, but I think that specific one was Blogger Local.
Okay. Chad has bought and sold 6 of his own businesses and also has a couple books. And we'll drop those in the description box for us. So it's From Blue to White, A Working Man's Guide to Self-Employment, and also Swinging Doors, A Guide to Selling Your Company. Oh, you also have a podcast. I actually didn't know that. And is the host of the Business Brokers Podcast, Buying, Selling, and Growing Businesses. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So first question is always the same. What was your first job?
My first job, when?
Just
when?
First thing you ever got paid for.
Oh man, picking up dog shit.
I love it.
I mean, if we're gonna be honest, that's what it was.
That is awesome. And so it was like entrepreneurial, like around the.
Yeah, it was. And, basically my mom and her boyfriend told me to go out there and do that and get paid. And then I was like, wait a minute, I can do this for other people. And I didn't care what it was. I just went out and did it. I was a little entrepreneur when I was a kid. And, I was shoveling snow and picking weeds and mowing grass and picking up crab apples. I mean, whatever I could do. I mean, it was just like, hey, you got $1 and you want me to do something. And if I do it, then I get your $1. I mean, it just made sense to me. And so I was born that way or something. I don't know how it happened. It was like genetic or something,
It's funny because most business owners we talk to, it's something like that. Like, oh, I was mowing lawns, or like, it was very entrepreneurial, or it was like, oh, I did lemonade stands. Like they have this, that it's like, oh, work for money. Like, I want money, I need to work. And like, it's just really interesting how that it usually translates into business ownership.
Yeah, sure. And you know what, not only that, but I would get a fundraiser at school. They would do a fundraiser and you had to go knock on doors and sell whatever thing that nobody would want to buy anyway. And it just taught me to knock on doors. So not only was I entrepreneurial, but then the school would do a fundraiser and the whole thing was go knock on your neighbor's doors, and I would just wear people out. I'd knock on doors until 9:00 at night. I was just relentless, and that relentlessness that I have has just never gone away. And so that's how I've been able to squeeze 100 years of life inside of 41. And awesome. As an entrepreneur, it served me to have that thing you were just talking about.
Yeah, it's the grit. It's the grit. Yeah, my daughter has that grit. We're always like, oh my gosh, she gets an idea and she just does not like let it go. And like,
absolutely,
constant, like, I'm doing the thing and whatever. And I just keep looking at my husband. I'm like, I know this is like exhausting right now for us, but that's just like, it's going to serve her well someday.
Yeah, that's very wise of you. And while we're on that subject, even though we didn't mean to stumble on that subject, let me tell you, my mother apologizes still to me today because, she didn't understand that. She didn't recognize it. And I was such a pain in the ass. I just wouldn't let anything go. And once it was in my head, that's what it was. And I would just wear people out. And so it's wise of you and your husband to recognize that in her and to foster it rather than to fight it. It's really important.
Yeah. I'm always just like, we can't squash it. We can't squash it.
Right.
Yeah, she's also my mini me. So I see a lot of like of my traits in her that I just know I have now. Like I didn't know I had them then, right? But I do know that I have them now. And so it's just like, okay, wow. And I'm always like asking my mom, I'm like, did I do that thing? And she's like, yes.
Yeah. Self-awareness just keeps opening up, doesn't it?
I know. Yeah. Especially as I'm like raising myself.
Right.
God's like, oh. So tell us a little bit about your background as a business owner.
Well, very entrepreneurial as a kid, and I hated school. I absolutely hated it. So whenever I was in my teenage years, I built a real company. You know, it wasn't just like I was a teenager trying to make a few bucks. I built a real company doing lawn and landscaping,
Mm-hmm.
trucks, trailers, mowers, the whole thing. You know, making real money. You know, I was making more than my teachers, and uh, I got on the work program. I considered dropping out of school
Mm-hmm.
because I just hated it. But I had such a strong network of friends. I think that's why I stayed in it, just because I thought, well, what the hell? I guess I'll just finish it up. But by the time I was 16, I was so over school. I was tapping my foot. I they just, I mean, the public school just fails entrepreneurs, I think,
Mm-hmm.
as a general rule. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
think school, it would be unfair to say that school isn't, worth its weight in some capacity, but not for everybody. And it certainly wasn't for me. So I built that company. I got on the work program. That was the only alternative. So
Mm-hmm.
I just had to do my mandatory classes and then I'd leave and go work. And I had my own company and just did really well with it. Ended up selling that company when I was 19, somewhere between 18 and 19, after I got out of school, and put a little money in my pocket. And I went on to flight school. I wanted to be a pilot. If I wasn't going to be self-employed, I was going to be a pilot. And I started flying planes, became a commercial pilot, lost my job in 9/11, and had a baby on the way. And it was, now what am I going to do? So I had to go back to, okay, self-employed roots. What am I going to do?
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, back then in 2002, well, 9/11 was in 01, but I was officially in the job market or the self-employed market in 02. And I asked a friend what was happening, because I've been flying planes. I don't know what's going on out there. And he told me about mortgages, and I'm like, well, what the hell is a mortgage? What do you mean you sell mortgages? That doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know anything about it. And he said, well, come over to my office and I'll show you. So he taught me, and I thought, man, this was easy. And that was back whenever rates they dropped down like 6.75 maybe,
Which
which
is, yeah,
for right
seems
now, that's
really,
high.
yeah, it seems really
Yeah,
high right now.
right. But rates had dropped. And so it opened up a market. So long story short, I ended up realizing that I could do it on my own. I went and borrowed $60,000 from a friend of mine, a very good friend of mine. And he wrote me a check for $60,000 to get started. And that was just licensing and lease deposit and copiers and whatever. It's just basically
Mm-hmm.
just to get started. And I started with a one-man shop. It was me and me only. I built it to 120 employees, and we were doing anywhere from $7 million to $10 million a year in revenue. Um, I had a hell of a marketing engine. It was inside my operation. We did marketing through mail. So it was just, we had folder inserter machines, and I could buy data and I could just send out mail. It was just a weapon. And so I
Mm-hmm.
had inbound calls coming in. I had 120 loan officers that were trained to sell the bank's products.
Mm-hmm.
And I was doing really well. Specific to some of my mistakes that I made was,
That's my next question. So go ahead.
yeah, the mistakes that I made was I was always focusing on marketing and always focusing on doing deals.
Mm-hmm.
And what I wasn't focusing on, because it's just not in my wheelhouse, or especially wasn't then, was
Mm-hmm.
accounting.
Mm.
And yeah, and you know what? I had an accountant, and I'm not trying to slam her, which I won't mention her name, but
We're all different.
she just wasn't. I couldn't get a hold of her. If I contacted her today, I'd hear from her 3 months later.
Yeah.
So here I am spending all this money. I mean, I was spending $150,000 a month in postage.
Whoa.
That's how much I was spending in marketing. And that's just my stamps alone. And so I wanted to know where I was at. I needed an accountant to tell me how I was doing as far as my revenues, my
Mm-hmm.
margins, where I should be on marketing. And the accounting was a black hole.
Mm-hmm.
So I was doing really well. I mean, I was making more money than what I could count, really. But then again, I didn't have an accountant that was counting.
Right. I think, and I tell entrepreneurs this all the time, like, for some reason, we think that entrepreneurs should know how to do accounting,
Right.
or like their wives should, which continues to baffle me. But I always tell people, that's not something that you know how to do. Why would you, just because you have a business, know how to do that?
Right.
It's a black hole for a lot of entrepreneurs.
It is. It is. And it was for me, certainly. And I just, I wish I would have had that piece. But what really happened was that '08 came and we were the ones selling all the subprime mortgages, and we just got crushed. Got absolutely crushed in that market. So I had 120 employees, went down to about 10 after '08 happened. And I had 5 leases. And I had about, I don't know, $150,000 a month that was hard cost. And the water spigot shut off.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I got crushed in '01 because I was flying a plane in 9/11, and I lost my career as a pilot in 9/11. And then I got crushed in '08 after I had built a multi-million-dollar corporation. What I really learned, though, in '08 was when you're doing well is the time to sell. I was contacted in 2005 when I was just killing it, and they wanted to buy my business. And I asked them, why in the hell would I sell my business? I'm making so much money. Well, in '08, I was broke.
That could have been their crash.
It could have been their crash, or more importantly, it could have been a bank that bought me that could monetize their own clients. And so my employees could have been human assets where, a bank like Chase or Wells Fargo or whatever, if they wanted to expand their mortgage division, they would have survived because they were the ones that had the products, and my employees could have sold their products.
Yeah.
So it could have been a good deal for somebody who just wanted to capitalize on what I had built, people that had, learned the mortgage business to the degree they did and had a different wheelhouse. We were only a subprime lender. In '08, they killed subprime. Yeah. It was all gone. And now it's back a little bit, but not like it used to be. Yeah.
There's just so much more regulation now.
Yes.
So what were some of the biggest successes for you in building your businesses?
The biggest success I had was also the biggest failure. It was my mortgage company. And I've built several companies and sold them. I built software companies. I built construction companies, specialty trade within construction, and that's how the book From Blue to White came about. Because basically, what I saw was people that could do the work, but they didn't know how to go get the contract. And so the whole premise of the book From Blue to White is how to be the working man, but how to go get the contract to where you're the contractor and you're hiring people to do the work.
How to be a business owner.
Yeah.
How to work on the business instead of in it.
Well, yeah, taking Joe's six-pack and showing him how to run his own company.
Yeah.
Because there's so many people out there that are talented. They just don't know how to be an entrepreneur. So they know how to swing the hammer. They know how to, make those beautiful walls behind you, but they don't know how to price it out and give the work to somebody else and make a profit margin.
Right.
So that's what the whole book's about.
That's awesome. I'll check that one out.
So I wrote that book based on my contracting experience. And then, I was along the way, I was just selling these businesses, and a friend of mine told me, Chad, you're so good at this. Why don't you start helping other people sell their business? And that's where a business was born. And the passion of that business was that I lost $9 million in 2008 because I could have sold my company for $9 million and it was roughly worth zero after.
That's so hard. So that was my question. My next question was, how did you get into brokering?
Well, when I was a mortgage broker, I learned how to broker. So brokering in itself is kind of a trade,
Yes.
And so whether you're brokering equipment or you're brokering people, I mean, staffing companies are brokering people. I have a broker's mentality. And so I just use that mentality to start selling. Well, I was selling my own businesses. And I learned how to do that by contacting qualified brokers to help me sell my business, because I would never try to do it myself. It'd be like defending yourself in court or something. You don't want to do that, right? Doing your own dental work,
that's not a good plan.
Yeah. So I hire other people to do it, and I learned along the way. And then there was, my friend was just like, man, you're so good at this. Why don't you just do it for other people? And so and I'm glad that he said that to me, because I had never thought about that. And so it opened up my mind and my heart to a different way of what I was doing, because I was pretty much fed up with building and selling businesses. I've done enough of it.
That's a lot of work.
It is. And so I just help other people do it now. And I would tell you my biggest success is really finding what I love.
Mm-hmm.
But my biggest monetary success was the mortgage company.
Mm-hmm.
It was worth $9 million, and I could probably have sold it in 3 or 4 months.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So what are some of your, so you guys buy, so you broker a deal between a seller and a buyer for businesses. So that's what business brokers generally do, right? So, but you guys have to figure out what the value is. You have to figure out what top dollar is. You have to help find the proper buyer. So what are some of your favorite kinds of businesses that you like to get top dollar for? So what industries do you guys excel at?
Manufacturing and distributing.
Mm-hmm.
Or distribution they are some of the sexiest businesses out there.
Mm-hmm.
And they were more scarce 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And they're more plentiful now because manufacturing has come back to the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And there's incentive for you to be in manufacturing and distribution, and the margin and the market's there for manufacturing and distribution. But I like all businesses, as long as they're cash flowing. It's all about cash flow, seller's discretionary earnings, it's all about that. So I've sold the weirdest businesses out there. Things you would never think of.
Tell me.
Well, I sold a company that made a valve for making beer run faster through the processes of manufacturing beer.
Mm-hmm.
I sold a ball company that is able to press an image on a ball, which I never thought about that either. I thought, well, that's easy. Just print whatever on a ball, but you're printing something on a
round
circular surface. And so there was a patent involved, and, just the weirdest things, embroidery equipment, and manufacturers, just oddball stuff, but they all make money. And I tell people there's a million ways to make $1 million.
Right.
And it's true. So I like all businesses that are cash flowing, and I've sold every goofy type of business there is, and I absolutely love it.
That's awesome. So what are some of the top metrics that make a business sellable?
Well, the first thing that makes a business sellable is cash flow, because anytime, or seller's discretionary earnings, whatever you want to call it, a lot of people get lost in EBITDA. And EBITDA really isn't the number. It's just one number. What is the business doing for the owner overall? What kind of lifestyle is it going to provide the new owner? And that question has to be dovetailed with another question, which is, what is debt service? What's the debt service on this loan to the bank for the buyers to own the business? And what are they going to be netting after they buy the business? That really is the main thing about selling a business. There was a gal, I sold a bra company. They were on QVC. It was a bra that you just pulled over yourself, and it was an unconventional type bra. And I thought, this is really goofy, right? And it was like a sports bra, but it looked like pantyhose, and it was just weird. Turns out she made a fortune, And so, how many people want to really go buy a bra company? Probably not a lot of people. But people are looking to buy the money that bra company is making.
Yeah.
So they're always buying money. And so I'd say the number one factor in selling a business to making it sellable is earnings, or seller's discretionary earnings.
The lifestyle of the owner, you said. That's what I wrote down, because people are buying or creating businesses to create some kind of lifestyle, usually, right? That's not generally, like, running ourselves ragged in a business. It's not generally what we're looking to do anymore. We're looking to create some kind of margin or gravy on our lives.
Yeah, and I think to your point, I think that mentality started coming in around 2004, maybe 2005. And I think it was the Timothy Ferris's of the world, the 4-hour work week and like that started making people think about their lifestyle more. Do you really want to work your ass off and not, barely make it and be chained to a desk. And I think people are realizing there's more opportunities out there. And so when people come to me to buy a business, a lot of it is how much money am I making? That's the first thing. And then secondarily, what lifestyle is it going to give me?
That's awesome. I love that. And I love that it's about that and not about like buying a job.
Yeah, I agree. There's some of that, but more than anything, it's that they're tired of the job. And so they're looking for lifestyle. Most of my buyers, I have 3,000 buyers at least right now. And most of them are coming out of a corporate job where they have 6 bosses and they hate their life. I mean, that's really where they're at.
So actually, we're gonna go off my script over here because I want to talk about that. So I've seen those people buy businesses and then tank them.
Have you?
Because they don't know how to run businesses. So how do you help buyers who have never run a business or have never owned a business? Like, how do you help them pick a good business for them?
Okay. Well, I would tell you the process itself should eliminate the risk of that happening. And the reason that it should eliminate the risk is because the bank is the one, the bank's taking the risk. If the bank is going to take 80% of the loan, you have to look at it like the bank's the one that's going to be out if there's a failure. But you know as well as I do that the bank is going to collateralize anything that the buyer has. They're going to hook their house, their rental houses. They're going to make them draw blood for a life insurance policy.
Depending on the loan.
I've
seen that.
It's a pretty rigorous process. And I would say the process itself eliminates failures. The analogy that's coming to mind right now is why are our Navy SEALs so effective? It's because the process weeds out those who can't make it.
Right.
And so typically, same thing with me, if you can't make it through the process, if you can't conduct yourself in a way that the bank is confident, and if I sense that you're not right for this business, I'm not going to let it happen.
Yeah.
So there's 2 types of brokers out there, a guy that needs a paycheck and a guy that doesn't. I want money.
Yeah, I'll take it.
I'm not saying that, but I don't need the money enough to do something that's going to result in a failure. So a good broker is not just trying to get 2 people to make a paycheck. A good broker should almost have the eyes of the bank, should almost have the eyes of an accountant, have the eyes of an attorney, and have the eyes of, hey, you're my brother or you're my sister. I don't want you to get in this business and fail.
Right.
So a good broker that you trust should have a heart knowing what's good for you and what isn't. And I am proud to say that I've never had a failure. I've never had one go bad.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the ones I've seen go bad are those the rollover business acquisitions where they're taking their 401ks, putting them into those C Corps, and then like the C Corp owns the 401k or the 401k owns the C Corp, and it's like, it's their money. And they're just like, this is a great idea. And they don't know how to run a business.
Right.
There's nobody like telling them that this is a good idea or a bad idea or helping them along.
Yeah, I got into a pretty stout confrontation with a guy one time. And it was a real ugly confrontation because whenever I do a business transaction, there is 90 days that the seller has to spend with the buyer to make sure that he's successful, that he understands, what to do and how to do it. And because those that want to be self-employed, they might have a little bit of pig-headedness to them. They might be a little bull-headed.
What?
So what? No. So,
I don't identify with that at all.
Right. So, me neither. So, sometimes people go in there and they start trying to change things. And I got into a real stout conversation with this guy. And I said, look, you are going to fail. And this is what I tell people. Go in there and do everything the way that the current owner's doing it, because that's what works. After you're done with your transition, And after give it some time, give it 6 or 8 months. And if you want to start making small changes, make small changes.
Make some notes. Doesn't
Yeah,
have to happen now.
Yeah, but it's career suicide to buy a business and go in not knowing what you're doing, acting like you do, and then changing everything that the owner was doing that made it successful. And me and this guy got into it, and so did him and the seller. And it was a bad deal. It was one of the worst deals that I've ever done. And he didn't fail, but he didn't succeed like he should have because he was doing the wrong thing. So I think to your point, I think that they don't really know how to run a business. And one of the worst things you can do is go in and not learn from the guy who's built the business. And as long as I put a good transition period in the contract, and as long as my seller is a good guy or a good gal and they got a good heart and they want to teach that buyer how to be successful, we shouldn't have a failure.
Yeah. It's about qualifying and matching probably as a broker more than anything.
Yes. And I've just turned people away before. I'm like, man, I don't like this deal. And I've told the seller, I don't think this is our guy. Let's move on. I do that all the time.
Yeah. And I think, having that person that's just like, this is not a good fit for you, or this is, this person's not going to, understand how to run this business is really important.
Yeah.
So
I think trust is lacking too, not to interrupt you, but I think trust is lacking in all of us. I think if I'm going to go sell my business, or I'm going to, let's just say I needed to defend myself criminally in court, or I needed to get through an IRS audit or whatever. I mean, I think as a whole, I think as a society, trust is lacking. And if you can be a trustworthy person in an industry such as mine that is full of people who just need a paycheck, who will tell you what they want to tell you, only to try to get a deal done to make some money. If I can just lead with compassion and lead with a heart and lead with integrity, I've separated myself from the rest of the pack. And I think that anybody that comes my way can trust what I'm telling them, from the numbers to the fit, to what the business is, to what it isn't. And I think that's what differentiates me from most, if not 98% of people in my industry. I'm not just here for a paycheck. I hope that I'm 70 years old and I go to bed at night knowing that I never had a failure. That's what I hope.
Yeah, I love it. So you're just like, this is the thing that like making brokering these deals, making these good fits is, what gets you out of bed every day.
I love it. I love it.
So what are some of the biggest challenges in selling a business?
People not showing their earnings.
Oh, yikes.
People not showing their earnings. That's the biggest thing. Second biggest thing is people thinking that their business is worth far more than what it is. You get somebody who's making $200,000 and they want to sell it for $1.5 million. It's just not how it works, So
no. So we primarily work with veterinarians, and so I work with the banks, and they're talking about these low buys, and they're like, yeah, we're gonna reduce our salary so earnings looks better. I'm like, you're gonna reduce how much money you're taking out of the business? Why would somebody buy something that needed to happen?
Right. Yeah, and veterinarians, they're a unique fit, because vets can come out of school and they can go buy a vet practice for nothing down.
Yeah.
There's programs out there.
The banks love them.
Yeah, banks do, because they figure they've spent a fortune in student loans. We'll go ahead and it's cool. I think it's a compassionate loan, basically. It's like, hey, you made it.
Yeah. So with all the bankers that I know that I've talked to that do this healthcare space lending, it's just they've been doing it for so long and they know their risk level.
Right.
They've it's super systematized at this point. So they know their risk level. They know what they're looking for. They know how to qualify a buyer and who they'll lend to. It's actually a huge amount of a lot of their book. And it's pretty low. I mean, like you're right. It's zero down, pretty low rate. I have a client that just got like a 4% rate, I think, on her business loan for a startup. So yeah, it's low risk.
Sure.
For the bank, because they've got it pretty systematized at this point, I think. But yeah, I mean, when we're dealing with professionals like that, I think a lot of the time, just depending.
Yeah. Yeah. There's different loans for them for sure.
Yeah. So, I already asked you that one. What trends are you seeing in the buying and selling of businesses as the baby boomers are leaving the workplace?
Well, it's ever changing. It's a great question. There's a lot of businesses that are being sold. Here's what I think is what's going on. I think that millennials and even Generation X, I don't know that they can fill the shoes of baby boomers. I think that a lot of these
it goes back to that lifestyle stuff. They don't want those businesses where people are working 80 hours a week.
There you go. And the grit and the fight that it took to build these businesses, some of Generation X has it. I'm saying the millennials really don't. And the millennials are even more so into lifestyle, and hard work is kind of like a 4-letter word.
Well, I think it looks different for them. You're right. It doesn't look like 80 hours a week. It might look like, emails at 6 a.m. and then heading to the gym. Like it looks different. Yeah,
it does. And nothing's bad, nothing's whatever, but I'm not, millennials, hey, they have their value in this market too, and they're going to have to somehow.
They have the ideas.
Yeah, and they're tech babies, and they've got their own trajectory, and they're going to be a different trajectory than the baby boomers. But these baby boomers they're hardworking businesses, and so I think that's changed a little bit with hard work nowadays. I don't think hard work's as plentiful. It's not as easy to find.
Yeah.
So I think the baby boomers are exiting, finding the right buyers to do the work and want to do it. It's a challenge. And a lot of the people that are trying to sell their business, the baby boomers, they are at a point where they're, especially men, maybe not so much women, but they're at an age where they want to sell, they think they want to sell, but they don't want to be obsolete. They don't want to be rendered useless. They want to have something to do. And so they're stuck in purgatory emotionally. What do I do here? Do I sell? Do I not?
But I don't want to be home because I haven't been there in 20 years. So I wouldn't know what to do with myself.
Right. And this is no kidding. I sold a business to a guy, or I sold his business, and he was 72. And after he sold his business, he told me, well, I just re-upped my lease. And I said, why'd you re-up your lease? He said, I can't go home. He didn't want to be home with his wife. So he opened up a new office, put a couch in there and a recliner and a TV. And
that's so funny.
Just told his wife, hey, I'm going to work.
That's so funny.
So I think a man has to have somewhere to go is the point. So baby boomers are stuck in that. They want to sell, but they don't really want to.
Wow. And we're living longer.
Yeah, you can't play golf every day, and you can't sit around,
I don't know. I won't play golf, but yeah. And I think that's part of it too. Is 70's not old anymore.
Yeah, that's true.
So they're like, I have to be out by 75, but then they're like, what do I do with myself?
Exactly. And if you've worked, and everything's a habit, work's a habit, and if you work that long, and now you suddenly are not supposed to be working, what do you do?
Yeah.
I'm 41, and I just love to work. I mean, if they took work away from me, I'd be miserable.
I love to work too.
So this whole thing, and I can tell you love to work.
I do.
But this whole thing about retirement, I think it's BS.
Yeah, it's just we're not cogs in the wheel anymore. Where we our brains stop working.
Yeah.
Like we just become obsolete.
So I have no retirement plan.
I'm building a business right now.
my retirement plan is to work until I can no longer work.
Yeah.
That's it. And everybody's trying to sell me retirement plans. Hey, what are you gonna do with your money? What are you gonna do? I'm just gonna work.
Just gonna work.
Keep working.
It's so funny. Actually, I was interviewing for a job at one point, and they're like, if you won the lottery, would you still work? And I was like, well, not initially.
No. I'd take 6 months off.
No, I'd go travel. And they were like, that's not the right answer. And I was like, I'm supposed to want to come to this place every day if I won the lottery? I wouldn't be working for you, probably. No.
Right. Yeah. If you're asking me that question, no, I would not work for you.
No, probably not.
Sorry to bust your bubble.
I know. And then the recruiter was like, let's talk about how you can answer those questions. But I'm like, you want me to lie to people? Yeah, we're good.
Right.
So how does social capital play into how a business is valued?
Social capital in what capacity?
Like marketing, online presence.
Well, the main thing to watch out for regarding that is your online reputation. Reputation management is everything. I went to sell a guy's business not too long ago, and I didn't check that at that point. I didn't check his online reputation. He was making good money. It wasn't a lot of money, but a guy could walk in. I think he was making like $180,000 a year. Somebody could walk in and after 3 or 4 months be self-sufficient to make $180,000 a year. So I thought I'd bring him on as a client, and everything looked great. And then I went to go dig in his reputation, and it was god awful. And I said, why aren't you paying attention to that? And he said, well, that's just the internet. I'm like, excuse me? You mean the internet's the thing that everybody's going to interview you on before ever deciding to make a call to you, and you don't care about it? And that's generationally one of those things too. He was, I guess, probably 67. And so he just thought the internet was just some thing
we were playing around on.
Right. And so reputation management, make sure that you have the good reviews up there, because people aren't going to give a good review just because they want to. They're going to give a good review because you gave them good service, you did a good job by them, and they believe that they had value, and they're going to do it because you asked them to do it. And if you don't ask them, it isn't going to happen. Whereas if they're pissed off because you didn't do them right, they're going to do it. They're going to go online and you're going to get trashed. So you have to watch for that.
Yeah.
As far as,
and properly manage those too.
Yeah, for sure. And I would say when it comes to selling a business, per your question, if you have a big following and you have a lot of activity, and you can show that you have, that you're generating revenue from your social platform, we could maybe ask for more value. But the problem is the bank doesn't see the value that way.
Yeah, they don't care about that.
They don't care. So to the owner, to the buyer, it's pretty nice if you've mastered the art of social media and you've got Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn and everything working in your favor, but it doesn't necessarily add a lot of value. Unless, of course, it's just a ridiculous following that you have. I mean, there's some people out there, their following only is worth millions of dollars. I mean, look at these clowns that do the most idiotic stuff online, like Dan Bilzerian. I mean, the guy could probably sell his online presence for $10 million or $20 million or maybe more. Who knows?
But it's just him, though. That's when it comes down to, like, you're an influencer. Can you really sell your personal influence?
Well, I think that there's a lot of value there if somebody could get in there and start monetizing his presence through ads and things like that. So there's value there. But what I'm saying is, as a general rule, to sell your business, it's not going to add any value to the business. It's always going to come down to seller's discretionary earnings, what the bank's willing to lend on, and what the payment's going to be for the buyer or the debt service.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. Yeah. So what are some key considerations in finding financing for a business purchase?
That's a wonderful question. And, the answer is that a good broker should have a lot of different banks to shop loans with. And the reason is that every bank has a different appetite. So one bank might have a big appetite for manufacturing. Another bank might have a big appetite for a lot of businesses, but they're really only really going to lend on it if it's got real estate attached to it. Other banks sell their paper. Some banks keep their paper. So it all comes down to the bank that you're working with, and a good broker will make or break the deal from happening based on the quality and the quantity of banking relationships that you have. And sourcing the banking is really a component of the broker's job. Because right now I know that if manufacturing or distribution comes in without real estate, I know where to take it. I know where to take it if it has real estate. I know what they're going to want. I know the underwriting processes. I know the culture in the bank, how much they're going to send it, what kind of gauntlets they're going to send us through. And so a good broker should know that in order to obtain financing without as much pain that it can sometimes bring. Because it's painful to take a loan to a bank that doesn't really want it, and you're trying to put a square peg in a round hole.
Yeah.
You know?
So I'm adding questions here as I go. What do you do? How do you work with SBA lending? Do you guys do a lot of that or no?
Yeah, we do. Most of the deals are driven by SBA, and the reason is, at least up to 5 million. The reason is because SBA is going to give the bank a surety on that loan. In other words,
some of those gauntlets.
Yeah, the SBA backed guarantee, especially at a SBA 7A preferred lender, the SBA 7A preferred lender is going to be required to go through all the steps that the SBA requires in order to be granted that guarantee. So the bank is in a better position from a liability standpoint whenever they lend on a business that's passed all the hurdles of the SBA underwriting.
Okay.
And so most people get an SBA loan because the banks are really only willing to lend SBA because it gives them more surety. Secondly, it only requires 5% to buy a business, but there's some goofy terms involved in that. So 10% down is what we need to get an SBA loan done at most of our banks.
Okay.
And so it allows a buyer to come in for 10%, which, think about the numbers real quick. Let's just say you want to buy a $2 million business. It's only going to require you $200,000 to buy that business. So let's just say you've been working in corporate America, you've saved up $250,000, you can go and be self-employed. Or if you are selling your business, right now it's a smaller business, you've sold it and you've made $600,000. You can go buy a $2 million business. It's only going to cost you $200,000. And that $2 million business, if we're going to use the multiplier of 3, that $2 million business should be paying a little over $600,000 a year, not counting your debt service.
So I have more questions for you now. Okay. What are some of the industries that you're seeing, like there's just no sellable businesses, like the businesses are dying, there's nothing that can be sold? And then give me the flip of that. What are some of your most upcoming industries?
I would say the businesses that are losing their luster are hard labor. The labor force, again, back to the millennial thing, how many people out there are really willing to work that hard? I think if you were to ask somebody who's in the hard work world, if it's digging ditches, if it's pouring concrete, if it's laying brick, if it's hanging tile, whatever, if it's mowing grass, whatever, they would tell you it's hard to find somebody to wake up at 6 a.m. every day and do that.
I don't want to do that.
Right. It's also hard to find those same guys that don't have bad habits. So a lot of those guys that are going and doing those hard labor jobs, they're going home and they're drinking or doing drugs or whatever. Or, their dog ate their homework, and their baby mama couldn't get them to work, and their cell phone wasn't charged, and their alarm clock didn't work. I think those businesses that are blue-collar, hard-working businesses that 50 years ago you'd have 30 people standing in line to go do that labor job, you're having 2 people standing in line. They probably have bad habits.
It's hard, and it's hard work for not a lot of money a lot of the time too. I think that's the hard part. It's hard to pay people a living wage in those businesses.
It is, because even if you paid them $20 an hour, the work's worth $50 an hour. And so you're just so those businesses are going away. The Mexican community are taking over a lot of those jobs.
Good.
And boy, they sure do have a spot in this workforce.
They do an amazing job.
They do.
We just had our fence done this last summer. Oh my gosh.
They work, don't
It's
they?
so pretty too. Like
Yeah.
they slammed out the fence in 24 hours and it's like perfect. Like
Yeah.
the lines, and like I'm a total perfectionist. Hi, I'm an accountant. We like things in columns.
I am an accountant.
Like, it's like the most perfect, like the line of the fence is like totally perfect. It looks so much better than it ever.
They know what they're doing for
They
sure.
They do an amazing job. They're craftspeople too.
Yeah, they are. And so on the other side, you said do the flip side. I think the most attractive businesses are those that are laptop and cell phone oriented.
Digital nomads.
Yeah. And the problem with those, though, is they're hard to bank.
Virtual businesses.
Yeah, they're hard to bank.
Because it's hard to quantify.
Yeah, I mean, you've got very minimal assets. You've got a website. You've got income by way of leads coming in somehow, some way. You're doing consulting. You've basically got a laptop, a mouse, and a cell phone. So how do you go to a bank and say, lend me $2 million? They're going to say, well, what are the assets? And you'll say, don't have any.
I don't have any.
And that's hard to get underwritten. So, but they are desirable businesses. The thing is that in order to buy one of these businesses, these digital nomad businesses, you have to have a lot of money down. I'm going to say 40% down. And the reason is because a bank will do, let's just say a bank will do 70% loan to value. So let's just say you wanted to buy a $2 million digital nomad business. You've got a $1,000 laptop and a cell phone. The bank's going to say, well, I mean, most banks are going to say, no, we don't want to do it. But if they do it, they're going to say, we'll do 70%. We'll loan 70% on this deal. So you have to have 30%. And then they're going to say, because it's a digital nomad business and you have to have the expertise within this particular field, we want to make sure that the seller does a 10% seller carry. So he's going to stick around to make sure you're successful. So now essentially the bank's doing a 60% loan on the deal. The seller's doing a 10% loan and the buyer has to come in with 30.
So let's talk about my industry because I just think it's interesting. So we're watching the accounting industry move from, low dollar tax returns, quantity to create revenues to like more consulting based. So they're not going to have CPA firms with, 1,000 clients bringing in, $100 a year. Right, to get to that million or whatever the math is. I don't do math. I do accounting.
There's a distinct difference.
There's a distinct difference.
Yeah.
And those like tax shops have assets. They have computers. They have physical locations. But we're watching the industry shift and change very quickly as our product becomes commoditized. Like pretty much people like we can outsource tax returns. Onshore, offshore, they're creating software right now that basically does the tax returns for us. Like you just import everything,
right?
Basically, and then check it, and you're like, sweet.
Yeah.
So talk about like those businesses and like how they're evolving. From product to service.
I think really what you're saying is that technology can almost eliminate any field where a personal touch was once needed.
Yeah, well, we do a lot of personal things. It's just not handing over tax returns.
Right. And so it's consulting based rather than, because now technology wise, we can probably, like you said, click a button and have everything populate and it pretty much gets you there. But as well as I do, understanding tax code and how it's ever changing. Right. I mean, your accountants are always going to be in high demand, but how they function is changing.
That's right. And so, those people that are just the data entry tax people, and I keep telling them adopt or die, because if you're not doing planning, if you're not learning new code, if you're not helping people optimize, you're going to be obsolete soon.
Yeah. And I think it's a matter of raising the game, isn't it? I mean, it's raising the bar, rather than, hey, bring your tax returns in here and let me do them and sign here and send these off. It's teaching people how to navigate their financial lives surrounding their business, surrounding their taxation, how to shelter themselves. It's more preparation, planning, and consulting now, I think, is where you're headed. Yeah, but I think that's where a lot of things are headed. You know, I mean, you can almost, I mean, you can learn how to do brain surgery on Google anymore, right? So how do you inject yourself to be the expert and let them know how to make the proper steps? I think that's where it's headed.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. It's interesting to me because I know most like CPA firms were looking at like 0.8 to 1.2 multiples for their businesses, and that's tiny.
It
always
is.
has been.
It is. You can get away with more as long as you have the right buyer. Sold an accounting firm for 2.7, maybe 2.8x STE.
Oh, wow.
As long as you have the right buyer. Also, the accountant has built a relationship with them, and so the main thing is the transition.
Yeah.
What's the accountant going to do? And in order to get that done, we had the accountant stick around from the time of close all the way through a full tax season. And he was compensated very minimally, but he didn't mind, so it worked. It worked out.
Yeah, I think that's part of the, like, anytime I see somebody being like, I'm going to buy a tax thing, I'm like, why? They're all going to leave and they're all undercharged and you're going to have a massive mess on your hands.
There is some acquisition risk there with the transition because if I really like you as my accountant and you're who I like, maybe I don't want you to give it to this other person that I don't like. And so maybe I could, maybe that accountant would buy that business and then lose 30 or 40% of his clientele inside the first year.
Yeah.
And so there's some risk there.
Yeah.
But that's just because it's such a personal thing, isn't it? I mean, it's very personal, opening up your tax returns and having somebody do surgery on them like you do.
Yeah, we do surgery over here.
Yeah. You do all the math and all the numbers and you make it work, right? And so it's an intimate thing. If I sent you my tax returns, there's an element of trust there.
Yeah, that's very true.
And most people say, I'm thinking about selling my business. I'm going to call my accountant. I mean, that's how trusted you are.
Yeah.
As long as you're doing your job right.
Yeah, I hope they call us first.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I actually had a conversation with a client the other day. I was like, you have to call us first. Stop not calling me.
Stop not calling me. I love that.
If we're going to continue, you're going to call me first.
Yeah.
Okay.
I love that.
Okay. All right, Chad. So before I ask my last question, what is the easiest way for people to find you?
Just go to petersonacquisitions.com, www.petersonacquisitions.com. And your listeners, as long as they go to the website, they can get a free download of the book.
Oh, cool.
If they go to my website, as long as they let me know it was your podcast, I will send them a free copy of the book. And it's Swinging Doors, a guide to selling your business. And really what it is, and a lot of people don't read books anymore, I'm finding.
No, I was trying to find you on Blinkist.
Say that again.
I was trying to find your books on Blinkist.
Blinkist. I don't even know what that is.
So Blinkist is like, it does like snippets. It's like Cliff Notes, audio Cliff Notes. Books. So it gives you like, it's just like Cliff Notes.
Gotcha. I'm going to have to look into that.
Yeah, I love
it. I probably need to put my book on audio, but they can get a free download of the book. And really what it is, it's just a guide to selling your business. And it talks about anything and everything. It's about 8 to 9 pages of real meat and potatoes stuff.
Okay.
And so I'll give them a free book, and then I'm real responsive. And the reason is because I love working and I work 7 days a week because I want to. And so if anybody from your podcast reaches out to me at petersonacquisitions.com, I will get back to them, just have them fill out a form, and I'll get back to them and answer any questions, and they can get a free book.
Sweet. So we'll drop the links in the description boxes.
Okay.
On all the things. Okay. So last question for you. What is the one piece of advice you would give someone who wants to grow a sellable business?
Okay. The one piece of advice is that if you want to grow and sell a business, you have to be married to it. You have to be so passionate about it. And passion is overused these days. The word passion is so overused because what does it mean? I mean, I love doing what I'm doing, but I'm sure if I could trade places with Tom Cruise, I would do it, right? So your passion, you don't have to necessarily be so passionate about the craft, but you must be passionate about building that thing to get it sold. Otherwise you won't be able to, because what happens is the passion starts to wane and I'll see it on the profit and loss statement.
Mm-hmm.
I'll absolutely see it. It's no doubt. They'll call me. Let's say they called me in 2016 and they're like, well, we're thinking about selling. We don't know. Maybe. And I say, sell now, because that tells me that your passion's waning. And then they'll call me back and they'll say, we want to sell right now. And I say, why? Well, because we're failing. Okay, who wants to buy your business when it's failing? You should have called me when your passion was high, because that's when your profits were high. So my one piece of advice, just to condense that, be passionate about it and be married to your business first. If you got a wife or a husband, that they've got to be second or third. Your business has to be first. You have to be married to it first. Be passionate about it. And let's just say you drop from a 10 to a 9 in passion. It's time.
Yeah. Sell it then.
It's time to sell it.
I love it. Perfect. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening or watching. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube, iTunes, or wherever you prefer to listen. If you learned something and found some useful information to apply to your business today, please consider giving us a thumbs up and a review. Until next week, be abundant.